What's up, YouTube? This is Too Raw for TV, and I hope you've enjoyed this little series that I've been doing about my top 10 list. Unfortunately, I had to block the goddamn dude that asked me about it because he didn't like where I had Kobe. Um, you know, he threatened to unsub for me, so I just did one better and got did him a favor. But at number one, I have Michael Jordan, and really don't know where to begin with him. If you're younger and you look at YouTube clips, you're still not getting the full justice of it. Like if, for instance, unfortunately, if you miss Kobe, you know, if you miss Mike, if you miss Larry, if you miss Magic, you didn't really see their careers. You didn't really see the actual games. You're just looking at clips. You're only getting a glimpse at what made them great. With Michael Jordan, you saw a guy come full circle. You never unlike what some of these idiots say on television, it wasn't just athleticism that made Michael Jordan great. Okay? It just wasn't athleticism. It was a combination of his freakish athleticism, it was a combination of skills, and it was a combination of, uh, I say, excellent court vision and drive, determination, will, and a competitive nature that I think is pretty much unparalleled. A competitive nature that sometimes borders on psychosis from what people have said about him. So the guy had to win at everything. And if he lost, he, you know, it burned him. Uh, friend or not, what I'm saying? Like he had to win, had to be number one, had to be the best. And you rarely see that. That's what made Kobe Kobe. There are a lot of guys out there that are supremely talented, had even more natural talent than perhaps Jordan or Kobe. But they never succeeded because they didn't have that thing in their chest that these guys have, that competitiveness, that will to win. Um, but Jordan came in the league gangbusters, man. I mean, absolute gangbusters. Um, Interestingly enough, he averaged 28 points per game his rookie year. All right. His rookie year, he averaged 28.2 points per game. I want to say like 6 rebounds and like 5 assists, 2 steals, shot 52% from the floor. Excellent rookie year. I think his season high was like 45 against the Spurs or something like that. Um, but, he started off that season a little bit slow. He started off averaging like 24 points per game the first couple of months. And it was the second half of the season where he really exploded. Um, so even though Bernard King won the scoring title that year, it was actually Jordan that led the league in total points. His sophomore year, he suffered a setback. He broke his foot. I think it was a game in Milwaukee. I think. Might be wrong about that. Where he suffered a broken foot and he missed 64 games. And the Bulls floundered without Jordan. I mean, absolutely floundered. Absolutely no shot at making the playoffs, it appeared. But Jordan came back, and I think he played like the last 15 games of that season. He battled with management as far as minutes played. But the Bulls, despite the fact only having a 30-52 record, mostly because Jordan wasn't there, people conveniently forget that when they have arguments against Mike. They were able to inch into the playoffs. I mean, barely inch into the playoffs against the Boston Celtics. And pretty much most um, sports analysts pretty much said that the Boston Celtics would just blow away this Bulls team. And for the most part, in two of those games, they were right. For game one and game three. Although in game one, Jordan did score 49 points, 30 in the first half. But it was game two that would be an epic battle. I mean, epic battle. And you already saw it was a coming of age party for Michael Jordan. Um, the Boston Celtics defense tries they might, could not stop Michael Jordan on that night. Michael Jordan twisted and turned and dunked and faded all the way to an NBA record 63 points in a double overtime loss. They took the Boston Celtics, the eventual NBA champion Boston Celtics, to the limit in that game. So it was a coming of age event for Michael Jordan. It put him on another pedestal. Jordan was already a star. He was already a star, a superstar, but that pushed him to almost iconic status. And it was Larry Bird that called him God disguised as Michael Jordan. The very next season, Jordan led the league for 37 points per game, the most points ever scored on a per game average by a perimeter player. And only Wilt Chamberlain and Elgin Baylor have averaged more points in the season than Jordan. And Michael became only the second player outside of Wilt Chamberlain to score 3,000 points in the season. The year where Elgin Baylor scored 38.3 points per game, he only played in 48 games due to Army service, if I'm not mistaken. Um, there was some knocks on Jordan that year. Even Bird said that he thought Michael Jordan was shooting the ball too much, and there were some people that said that he was selfish and only was concerned about scoring. And there wasn't a much. Some people even questioned his commitment to defense. So the very next year, Jordan, while still averaging 35 points per game, wound up leading the league in steals at over 3 a game and won Defensive Player of the Year as well as League MVP. And Jordan wanted to show that he was capable of being that team-orientated player that people saw uh, Magic Johnson and Larry Bird as. So the very next year, while still under uh, Doug Collins, he was still the head coach, Michael Jordan played a role similar to LeBron James, where he had the ball in his hand most of the time. He was playing point guard for stretches of that season, or the point position. And that's when he had that stretch where he had 10 consecutive triple doubles, I believe it was, or something like that. It was some stretch where he had like either 10 consecutive triple doubles or he had 10 in 15 games or something like that. And for the season, despite being a 6'6" guard, only 195 pounds, Jordan led the league in scoring with nearly 33 points per game. He averaged 8 rebounds per game and 8 assists per game. These are numbers that LeBron James would be jealous of. So to sit there and say that he couldn't play like LeBron James is asinine, because he could. Not to mention the fact that he was also a monster on the defensive end. Absolute monster on the defensive end. It got to the point where opposing teams didn't like even passing the ball in the area. They didn't like even passing in the area where Michael Jordan was at, because he was just such a ball hawk. And he would, the passing lanes, he was a beast. And he also one-on-one cherished shutting guys down. The very next year was the first year that Phil Jackson became the head coach of the Chicago Bulls, and he forced Michael to alter his game. Um, he forced Michael to be less ball dominant and to play off the ball more, and to trust his teammates more. As you know, all know in this time period, the beast of the East had transitioned from Larry Bird's Boston Celtics to earlier, it was between the Sixers, Julius Erving Sixers, and Larry Bird's Boston Celtics, but now it was Isaiah's Detroit Pistons, and they were kicking the Chicago Bulls' ass. They had rules designed to slow down Michael Jordan, even though he still averaged 30 points per game against a team that had rules designated to stop him. And which is why it's asinine to compare Giannis Antetokounmpo to Michael Jordan. But slowly the Bulls were getting better. They went from being ousted by the Pistons in 5 games to being ousted by the Pistons in 6 games in a series to in 1990. Although they were blown out in Game 7 at Auburn Hills uh, by 20 points, I think, 21 points or something like that, 19 points. The fact that they went to a 7th game in a series where Pippen clearly underperformed and was intimidated should have been some encouraging sign for the Chicago Bulls, and it was. And the Chicago Bulls went on a run throughout the 1990s when Michael Jordan was there, where they won 6 NBA championships, and they won every NBA Finals that they appeared in. And I say they because they were a team and not just Michael Jordan. Okay? They were a team, especially the last three-peat. Michael Jordan reached rarefied air in the early 1990s. Um, he went from being icon to another level. Like, he reached a level that only certain people reach, like the Muhammad Ali's and whatnot. Um, Going into the Dream Team, the consensus was that Magic Johnson was the most popular global player, but Magic Johnson and others saw that he had been replaced and surpassed by Michael Jordan. Um, Chicago Bulls won the championship in 1991. Jordan put up insane numbers in that finals. I think he averaged like 31, 6, and 11, and was leading that series in assists until the last game in '92. One thing I remember about Michael too is he always had these iconic moments in the playoffs. That's one of the things that I think if you're in a conversation for GOAT, you have to have dominated when the stakes were highest. Um, that's one thing about LeBron James, as great as he is, that sometimes I think he can up. He can come up short in certain games. He's had his great moments, but sometimes he comes up short. With Michael in '91, he had the move against the Lakers. Excellent all-around series. In '92, the shrug. Game 1, of course, 39 points, but 35 in the first half. Didn't really try to shoot the ball in the second half. Could have easily scored 50 points if he wanted to. Um, I think he averaged like 35. I think it was 35.8 points per game or something like that in that series. Shot the ball very well. In '93, the Chicago Bulls really probably had no business winning the championship that year. They really had no business winning the championship that year. The reason why I say this is because I think out of all the Bulls teams that might have been the weakest team, it's debatable between the '93 Bulls and the '98 Bulls. Um, Definitely it was the weakest team of three-peat. And the Bulls largely relied on Scottie Pippen and Michael Jordan offensively and defensively to win a lot of their games. And many people thought that the New York Knicks, who had given the Bulls a scare in the '92 playoffs, that would be their year to finally dethrone the Chicago Bulls and make it to the playoff and make it to the finals. Excuse me. And it looked like that was going to be the case after the first 2 games of the Eastern Conference Finals between the Knicks and the Bulls. But Chicago Bulls had other plans. You know what I'm saying? Game 3 was, if I remember correctly, was a rout, for the Bulls, despite the fact Jordan didn't shoot the ball very well. Game 4, I remember it was a Memorial Day game. Jordan scored 54 points, put on an offensive clinic, made John Starks look like a grocer, which he was. And the Bulls ultimately won 4 games in a row and made it to the finals. And there they played a juggernaut team. I mean, they had the Phoenix Suns as an opponent. And with all due respect to Utah, and the Seattle Supersonics, I still think that Phoenix Suns team was the most talented team the Bulls played in the finals. You had Charles Barkley at or near his prime, the league MVP. You had Kevin Johnson, who people don't remember, but Kevin Johnson was a top point guard in the NBA at the time. You had two great players in their primes at the same time on that team. You still had Tom Chambers on that team. You had Dan Marley, who had evolved as a great uh, third option guy that could give you 17 to 20 points in his sleep. Uh, Guy that transitioned and became a great deep ball shooter. Could shoot the three and get hot at any moment. You know what I'm saying? You had Cedric Ceballos, I think, was still on that team. You had the great rookie Richard Dumas, whose career was unfortunately derailed due to drug use. But that team was deep, man. Tom Chambers, if I haven't said him, you know what I'm saying, coming off the bench. Frank Johnson, I remember on that team. There's a lot of people don't forget, man, but that team was deep. And the Bulls weren't. But the Bulls had Michael and Scotty. And Scotty put up a magnificent series. But Michael Jordan put up a historic one. And it took every one of those points for them to win. He averaged the NBA record 41 points per game during that series. I think it was game 4, I think it was, when he had 55 points in a game. It was the only home game that Chicago Bulls won. And inexplicably, outside that game, every game that the team won was on the road. And ultimately, in game 6 at Phoenix, the Chicago Bulls behind John Paxson three-pointer won a third championship. And Michael Jordan had never been as high as he was then. But shocking to many people, Jordan's career would soon be over. He retired just before the beginning of the 93-94 season. Um, Tragically, his father had been murdered that summer, and Jordan had been complaining for a while that he was losing some of his competitive edge. And he retired and played minor league baseball for a while. And, I remember being a Bulls fan at the time, man, and I always had the impression in the back of my mind that he would come back. He would come back. I think he was just burnt out, but I always thought that he would come back because I knew that he would see the new guard excelling, new names, new faces, new challenges. Penny Hardaway, Shaquille O'Neal, Keem Olajuwon now, is he the best player in the game? I know these things would kind of rile him up. And eventually I kind of felt like he would come back. I didn't know when, but I felt that he would come back. I didn't know it was going to be that soon, though. I thought it might have been like maybe when he was in his mid-30s. But I'm telling you, as a Bulls fan, man, you got to give credit to Phil Jackson for that magnificent season that he had in 93-94. You got to give credit to Scottie Pippen, who I think was the all-around best player in the NBA during those years, those 2 years that Michael was out. But the team missed him. The team missed Michael. And when he came back in March of '95, you know what I'm saying, it's a shot in the arms to the NBA and, of course, to the Chicago Bulls organization, the Chicago Bulls fans. But he wasn't the same player. He never was the same player after the retirement. He lost a lot. He lost a step. Even though he still was very quick, but he lost a step. Couldn't do certain things that he used to be able to do. Defensively, even though he still was great, he wasn't as quick defensively as he had been in his prime. But he still had enough left in the tank to be a great player, and he made some adjustments. He wasn't as exciting as he used to be. He didn't dunk as much, but he became more fundamentally sound, and his high basketball IQ made up for any type of deficits that were now there as a overall player. But in '95, the Chicago Bulls lost to Orlando Magic in the playoffs. And the Bulls were missing some muscle. You know what I'm saying? They lost Horace Grant before the start of the season, and they were missing an inside defensive presence. And It was a disgruntled player in San Antonio that would ultimately be signed by the Chicago Bulls named Dennis Rodman that would lead that team to a renaissance and another three-peat. And ultimately, um, I knew that they would be a good team, but I didn't know that they were going to be a historically great team. And the 95-96 season, the Bulls won 72 games, and ultimately they won a championship against the Seattle Supersonics. But the thing I remember about that team is that overall they were a better team than the earlier teams. You know what I'm saying? You had, even though Michael and Scotty were slowly declining as players, I think you can make the argument that Luke Longley might have been their best center of that era of the championship years. Bill Cartwright was better in his peak, but by the time the Bulls got Bill Cartwright, he was already diminishing a little bit. Um, Tony Kukoc, who won Sixth Man of the Year for the Chicago Bulls in 95-96. I think it was 95-96. So you had Tony Kukoc, who could put up between 13 to 20 points in his sleep. You know what I'm saying? I remember we had like a lot of glue guys. You had Randy Brown. You had Bill Winnington. You know what I'm saying? Mainstay. Steve Kerr, the greatest three-point shooter in terms of accuracy in the history of the NBA. Judd Bushler was okay. You know what I'm saying? But anyway, Chicago Bulls would become the dominant team of the mid to late 1990s, and it was capped off by a championship against the Utah Jazz, who are one of the great teams in NBA history. You know what I'm saying? I know there's a lot of New Age fans conveniently like to attack that team because they see a bunch of white guys out there, so they think the team is slow and athletic. Whatever, man. But it's asinine to say that a team. This is how stupid some of these dudes are. In a league now where athleticism is not predicated as much, right? We got a jump shooting league now, right? So you're gonna tell me a team that had nothing but some of the best jump shooters in the league at that time: John Stockton, Jeff Hornacek, right? Karl Malone. A team not predicated on athleticism, and somehow and was the king of pick and roll, would somehow struggle in today's NBA. Just idiots, man. But Michael Jordan retired for a second time in 1999. Now, he would come back and play with the Washington Wizards. More or less, it was not a huge success, his tenure with the team. But, it didn't really take away from his legacy. And overall, Michael Jordan's legacy is, it's just, it's kind of unparalleled, man. You know what I'm saying? The guy won 6 NBA championships, all right? He won 6 NBA championships, 10 league scoring titles, which is an all-time record. Second place is Wilt Chamberlain with 7. All right. What else I want to say about him? 5 times he was league MVP, tied with Bill Russell for the second most league MVPs. 14-time NBA All-Star, 3-time NBA All-Star Game MVP, 10-time All-NBA First Team, 1985 All-NBA Second Team. He was the NBA Defensive Player of the Year in 1988. 9 times he was NBA All-Defensive First Team. He was the 84-85 Rookie of the Year. He was on the All-Rookie team in 85. 3 times he led the NBA in steals. 2-time NBA Slam Dunk Contest champion. Never even really went into detail about his battles against Dominique. Although I will admit that Dominique got cheated out of one of them. His number 23 was retired by the Chicago Bulls. And interestingly enough, his 23 is retired by the Miami Heat. Now you might say, why is his number retired by a team that I played for? Well, Pat Riley has such respect for Michael Jordan as a player that he would not allow another guy to wear that jersey number. He just felt like it shouldn't be worn by anybody else. So that's much respect. He was the 3-time Associated Press Athlete of the Year from 91 to 93, Sports Illustrated Sports Person of the Year in 1991. He was on the 50th anniversary all-time team, and Uh, guess I'll mention this. And he won the Presidential Medal of Freedom from Barack Obama, President Obama, 2016. He had career averages 30.1 points per game, an all-time record, just slightly ahead of Will Chamberlain, to go along with 6.2 rebounds per game and 5.3 assists per game. Shot just under 50% from the floor. And the guy really didn't have a lot of weaknesses, man. I mean, earlier on it was his outside shooting, but when he came back from retirement, he became one of the best outside shooters in the game. From 22 feet on in, I mean, Michael was a beast. You know what I'm saying? Even from three-point range, he developed into a good three-point shooter. Between 35 to 40% from three-point range in his prime. So he really didn't have any weaknesses when he reached that zenith as a basketball player. Of course, he's a Naismith Memorial Hall of Fame as a player. He won Olympic gold in '84 in Los Angeles. And of course, in 1992 in Barcelona, he won Olympic gold. And just an amazing player, man. Amazing basketball player. And that's pretty much it, man. Pretty much it. Tell me what you guys think.